Skill 17, triangle congruence by side, 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 and side, angle, side. So we're going to do a couple of these proof problems. So the first one, question 6, states, given segment IE is congruent to segment GH, segment EF is congruent to segment HF, and F is the midpoint of GI. We want to prove that the triangle EFI is congruent to triangle HFG. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is figure out what we're given. So we're going to rewrite the given statement. So our statement would be IE is congruent to GH, EF is congruent to HF, and F is the midpoint of GI by given. Okay, so now what we need to know to have the triangles both be congruent is if we could use side, side, side or side, angle, side. So if we figure out if this last side right here is the same as the other side, then we could use side, side, side. So that's what we're going to try to do. We know that F is the midpoint of GI. So I'm going to use that information because I know what midpoint means. It means that F is right in the middle of that segment. So I can say segment IF is congruent to segment GF. So that would be my statement there, and that's the definition of midpoint for my reasoning. And finally, if you notice now, we have all the sides marked with congruence, so that means that we can use our side, side, side postulate. So I would say triangle EFI is congruent to triangle HFG. Make sure that's the congruent symbol. And that reasoning would be the side, side, side postulate. And that would be your final answer. Q, E, D. And that's it. You're done. On this next example, we are given, this is problem number 10, we are given segment GK bisects angle JGM, and GJ, that segment, is congruent to GM, and they are all marked. Okay, so we want to prove that the two triangles are congruent to each other. So again, we're going to start out with what we're given. So I say GK bisects angle JGM, and segment GJ is congruent to segment GM, and like I said, already marked. Okay, so now the next thing, one of the hints that we always look for in proofs is we look for geometry words in our proofs. So I see the word bisects. That is a definition that we use quite frequently. So I'm going to look up that definition, and I see that that means the two angles that it bisects are the same. So I can say those two angles are congruent. So I'm going to say JGK is congruent to MGK. So that's my next step. So that gives me angle JGK is congruent to angle MGK by definition of angle bisector. Okay, so now I have a side and an angle, but in order to use side, angle, side, I need to know the other side that is touching the angles. So I'm going to be looking at this line right here. This one needs to be congruent in order for that to work. Well, that's nice that the two angles are put right next to each other. Because of that, I should be able to make my next step. So I would say that that line, that segment, is congruent to itself. So GK is congruent to GK, and that's by the reflexive property. I'm going to be using that because that line, that segment, is shared by both triangles. So that's why I'm going to use that. And finally, because I have my side and my side and my angle and angle and then the other side here. I have two sides in the included angle of both triangles, so that's why I can make the jump to the triangle, and that would be my final step. So I'm going to say triangle GJK is congruent to triangle GMK by the side angle side postulate. And the last example is number 12. Given FG is parallel to KL and segment FG is congruent to segment KL, prove that the triangle FGK is congruent to the triangle KLF. Okay, so once again, I'm going to start with what I'm given. So I have FG is parallel to KL and FG is congruent to segment KL, and that is by our given. So the next thing I'm going to do is I need to figure out what this parallel stuff is and what the fact that the two are congruent are. So I need to get either side angle side or side side side. It looks to me like it's going to be really hard to do side side side, so I'm going to go with the side angle side route. First thing I'm going to notice is I'm going to look at this line right here because it's the same and it's in both triangles. So I'm going to use that. So I can say segment KF is congruent to segment KF by the reflexive property. So that is what I have at this point. I have that those two are congruent to each other. Okay, now the next thing I have to do is I have to figure out how to get an included angle. So I want the angles that are included between the two to be congruent, but I don't know how to do that yet. Okay, so I'm going to look at my parallel lines because I haven't used that information yet. So when I have FG parallel to LK, then I have a transversal line. So if I envision that my transversal line is right here, then I can think about my corresponding angles, alternate interior angles, same side interior angles, that type of thing. So envision that everything is extended out. And then you should notice that these angles right here are alternating interior angles. So if I look at my definition sheet, my theorem for alternate interior angles says that they are congruent. So that is my next step. So I'm going to say that GFK is congruent to LKF. Okay, so now I have a side included angle and another side, side included angle, another side, so I can make the final step to say that the triangles are also congruent. So I would say triangle FGK is congruent to triangle KLF, and that is by the side angle side postulate. So those are your notes over triangle congruence by side 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 and side angle side. Summarize your notes, finish this worksheet, and then you should be ready for your quiz.